Okay, I'm going to wave that from there to get this rabble in order. So we'll be broadcasting. I'd just like to welcome you all to Resources tonight, 29th of January. January is nearly done, for those of you who've been waiting for it to come to an end. It's a long old month, isn't it? Right, just the evacuation procedure. We're not anticipating an evacuation tonight, so if the alarm does sound, it is because there is an incident. So on discovering the fire, please carry out the following. We'll sound the alarm, and on hearing the evacuate signal, please carry out the following. Exit the building to your nearest safest exit. So that's through there. All visitors need to report to Assembly Point G. All staff to their designated assembly point on Woolpack Way. And please don't leave for any reason until told to do so by the incident controller or the fire brigade officer, whichever it is. So thank you. But as I said, not planned tonight, so fingers crossed we can just get through that without that. So I've got apologies for absence next. Members away on official council business. Apologies this evening. Councillor Taylor, and is there Councillor Hobley, thank you, and welcome to Resources. Any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests? No, I'll take that as a no. Right, public participation, as always for Resources, we are overrun, so we'll move swiftly on to agenda item 5, minutes of the Resources Board held on the 13th of November. We're going through the touch. And then page 2.
Is there any chance that we could have a comment after Councillor Riley's name? It looks like we've been married.
Excellent, yeah.
Councillor Riley Stewart. No, that's yes. I'm sure we can pick that up very easily. Thank you. I'll sign those ones and pass them back to Marina. Thank you. Agenda item 6 then, moving on quickly to our first item of business, the General Fund Capital Programme. Tonight that we've got a recommendation that the board supports the schemes outlined in the appendix and the Council's 3-year General Fund Capital Programme for the Resources Board services. Are there any questions on that agenda item? I can see Councillor Watson.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I was just looking through in the Appendix A, and it struck me that there was a lot there from ICT infrastructure, then network, telephony. They all seem quite similar. So the IT infrastructure talks about development network and hardware, and then the next line down talks about network infrastructure. And I just wonder whether is there any duplication, or could we just group it into one, into ICT and software and kind of what it covers, because it just seemed to be quite similar.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree with you actually. When you look at this, infrastructure development, network infrastructure, and those systems, are they distinctly different projects? Is that, I'll just hand over to Alison on that one.
Yes, so I mean they are. The budgets are in place for specific projects, so that each budget here can be broken down even further. But I mean, I can go back to the head of corporate services and ask if they can be amalgamated. But I think that the reason they're separate is because they're made up of quite a lot of individual projects. Okay.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Watson?
Yeah, if I could, and just clarity, on the server, the virtualization one, it talks about it being a replacement of an existing virtual server. Is it replacement, or is it for to basically put stuff in the cloud rather than have physical servers?
Because I think when looking at some of the things actually, and we have physical servers within the building. So one of the things it looks to me is it a replacement? I think we can deal with it on email after potentially, but is it a replacement? Or is it a move to virtual servers elsewhere?
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I don't know the detail, but I can get the head of corporate services to email.
There will always be a physical device on site which contains virtualization. Virtualization doesn't mean going to the cloud. So it probably means replacing the RAID with the virtual service contained as well.
Thanks for that.
No, because they're always applications that aren't in the cloud and the level that, of support required for the existing infrastructure that's physically based on site.
Yeah, that's where the virtualisation will be kept on site.
Thank you for that. It's always good to have an IT expert here. So I've got Councillor Simpson and then Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to understand a little bit more about replacement planning, enforcement and local land charter systems. Because the basic details say to review and assess the system, ensure it still meets user need and replace if required. Is the 28,000 to replace, or is that just for the review and assessment?
I think one of the things around the planning system is one of the things we had agreed as a board before was a system upgrade, haven't we? In a new system for planning. Is this in relation to that or is it separate as well?
I thought it was in relation to the system upgrade that had already been approved, but again, if you want any detailed information, I can get an email response, because I'm probably not best placed to answer the detail, but that's what I thought it was. I thought it had already been decided that we were going to replace planning.
Yes.
And that sounds logical, Chairman, but to publish a report saying we're going to review and assess it implies that we haven't done it. And this is a further review and assessment.
Okay, so we can take that away. One of the things I thought it could be with a lot of the infrastructure work that is already in this budget as well, is as we know, a lot of our systems aren't the most up to date and require quite a lot of work. And if we're embarking upon a new planning system, is the infrastructure that exists currently not suitable for it to be operational, and we require the infrastructure first before we can put the new system, and that's just is it that before that, if that makes sense.
And,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Chairman, Michael Gove gives us a new planning system every other week.
So well, we can't keep up with that. So we need somebody one that's scalable and adaptable. Thank you. Sorry, and then I have Councillor Parton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Labour Group, we're in our budget process at the moment. We're looking at our capital projects. We're not in a position to commit at the moment, so we will be abstaining on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Letting you know. That's fine. So are there any other questions on agenda item 6? If there are no more questions or any points to make, shall I move that to the vote? Do I have a proposer? Councillor Humphreys, thank you. And a second? Councillor Clues, thank you very much. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Abstentions? Thank you. That's carried. Moving on to agenda item 7. The housing revenue account. So our task tonight is there's quite a few recommendations to the board tonight in relation to agenda item 7, the revised estimates, capital programme, business plan, rent review and fees and charges. So before we go any further, are there any questions on agenda item 7? Councillor Simpson and Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a very brief question on Appendix D. In principle, are we covering our cost on the fees and charges? And I'm particularly thinking about, there was some which I go £1 a night, and actually being indicated to me, we don't actually have any guest bedrooms. Do we have guest bedrooms? And are we covering our costs on the £1 a night?
Thank you, Angela. We couldn't work, when we had a bit of discussion, we couldn't work out where we might have guest bedrooms. So we thought, well, we'll ask Angela. She'll probably do that one.
You've got 2 guest bedrooms, one in Rowland Court in Arley, and the other one in Meadowcroft in Arley. The Meadowcroft one is not used very often at all, but the one at Rowland Court's got a little shower in there. Some of the bungalows are 1 beds, so that is used quite often. By obviously
visiting family.
Visiting family coming from wherever, and rather than having a bed in the living room, they use the guest bedroom, and they've got facilities, so it's quite well used.
Thank you.
And Chairman, I'm supportive of having that, you know, any loss we make on this is going forward, I presume, into the housing revenue account. So as a generality, with all of the fees and charges of Appendix D, are we covering the cost or are we making a loss on them?
So there's a mix within Appendix D, isn't there? Appendix D. So, you know, so some of the communal centres, you know, for example, at Digby Road potentially, and if they're, is that one of the ones where they've got a kitchen and if someone hires it, they hire the kitchen separately and all the rest of it. I think in terms of fees and charges. So are there a lot of costs that go with that?
No, they're making a cup of tea and you know, having a knitting club and things like that. So it's also a way of encouraging our tenants into the room with others and socialising. I couldn't honestly say whether we are covering our costs absolutely, and we can check that, but I would say that you haven't put these charges up for a long time because you want them to be reasonable to encourage use of the rooms and encourage socialisation of, you know, of our tenants that sort of are using the room at the same time. Certainly with regard to cleaning services and window cleaners, they're based on actuals. So we obviously we do need to cover our costs in those. But these more sort of, you know,
Thank you.
connected to the sheltered schemes are probably below what you might be able to charge if you were commercial.
Okay, thank you.
Caroline, I didn't imply commercial. You know, I'm quite well aware that these could be significantly more if they were commercial. My question was simply, are we covering our cost on the whole of Appendix D, not merely on community centre?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think one of the things is that it isn't necessarily clear because it's hired and it's, if someone uses a kitchen, they pay £2, for example, on this one as a voluntary group, or pay £1. If it's hired privately, it's £2 and they're using a kettle and running water. So they're using some electric and some water potentially to make a cup of tea. I think by overall, maybe we need to have a look at a project through our housing task and finish or something like that, where we can look at what the bills are associated with that annualised, and then look at the how often they're hired. Because unless you had some of the frequencies and the higher rates, you wouldn't necessarily know some of that. So I think we could probably do a little side project on understanding those as an entirety.
Thank you, John. I'm
I don't think it's
I
very
think
clear.
as a principle for me,
Yeah.
there is not much point sending Appendix D to the board if we're not supposed to ask questions on it or challenge it.
No, that's
You know,
fine.
There's no, I mean,
We like
if we're
challenge.
never going to make a change to this, and simply stop wasting the paper sending it to them.
Thank you, but we will take that up. Councillor Clues.
Thank you, Chair. Just on Councillor Simpson's point, that I think, you know, I'm quite happy if we cover his costs. I wouldn't like to think that we're making money on some of the voluntary groups, because I know two groups at least that use one, and one is a disabled group and the other is the veterans. And if we lost them, I don't know where they go. That's probably the only time they meet up, you know, at least once a week. So we do need those. But I do understand where it's coming from. As I say, and if we are covering his costs, I'm fine with that. But I wouldn't like to think that we're making profit out of any of these voluntary groups. And the other one, I did mention about the garages, where I thought it was only 25p difference between a tenant renting a garage and others, but then I realised that if you're not a tenant, you get back put on that. Is that right, Alison? Yeah. And you don't give him a tenant. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
I think so. Your question's answered on that. Sorry, did you have your hand up there?
Yes,
Sorry about that.
Okay, yes, agree with Councillor Clues on the community rooms. I think they are, where they are used, they're quite well used, and yes, the charges don't seem to be, mitigating against that. Our problem is with the 7.7% rise in rent. Now, I know it's geared to the inflation rate plus 1% that was there in September, but if we look at salary increases, when we look at public service people in public services, unless you're a consultant, haven't received anything like 7.7%. They're well below that. Doctors and nurses, 4% is the going rate there, or whatever. And that's where it's at. These people are often the most important people in our community in terms of the cost of living crisis. There is the much vaunted tax break, some £460, but actually this rate increase wipes that out basically over the year. It's 7.7%. The current rate of inflation is down into 4%. Yes, we know it's normally fixed in September, but we challenge the fact of using this rate of increase for the most challenged members of our community. So we would not in any sense be able to support that.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Just to give a response in terms of that, so in line with the social rent policy set by government, when they also had a decrease at the time, we could ill afford to take that decrease, and we had to do that because we've made a commitment at this council that we would follow that policy. And I believe that's still to be the case. So I accept your point, but it's not a raise that's set by ourselves. Councillor Bond.
On that, my understanding was that the national policy was an upper limit. We could increase it by less than that if we wanted to. But also, in terms of the current year, I think I also object to in the 30-year HRA business plan, it's assumed that we're going to increase it by 1% over inflation every year for the next 30 years, which obviously that will add up to an awful lot over that time, and people are unlikely to get wage increases that match that.
Well, let's hope that the direction of inflation continues in the way that it has, and obviously that will improve that circumstance because it's obviously been low for many, many years as well. The issue for us as a council is that our costs aren't fixed, and our costs also go up by inflationary amounts. And one of the other things that we have as a council is we don't have control over our own payroll increases either. And one of the things we've had in the last 12 months and beyond is rises that weren't necessarily linked to inflation. They're about equalisation and bringing people up in the bands and the scale points, and the pension commitments that go with that. At that percentage rate that's within that's an enormous burden to overcome when you don't actually increase your income by anything like the proportion. So I take your point, obviously, and also hope that the work that's been started and is starting to show benefits continues this year and gets the inflation rate down to 2% as we all hope it will. Any further questions?
Sorry, Chairman, one I forgot, and that's on the item 13, new build right to buy receipts. There's a reference there that says there are no Section 106 opportunities available to use the funding. Is that we haven't got current Section 106 or that we can't use Section 106? And if it's the former, are there no proposals coming forward over the course of the next 18 months, which I think is the time frame we have?
Okay, so the right to buy, when we receive monies in for right to buy, 40% of that we can use for investment in property, and the other 60% we have to find ourselves of the cost of the property. I presume you're saying, why isn't that supported by Section 106, and why isn't there Section 106 to support that?
Partially that, but I just want to understand the comment. It says there are no 106 opportunities available. We discussed it earlier. There was a question over could you use 106 or not? And if you can, is there no forward view as to what may be coming and what we might be able to do over the course of the next 12 months?
We have used the right to buy receipts for Section 106 agreement developments in the past, so that is possible for us to do it. But I sought advice from planning colleagues, and they told me that there isn't anything forthcoming in the time frame that we've got to spend these right to buy receipts.
Okay. So to spend these right to buy receipts, which, just for clarity, if we don't use them for something, we can lose them within a time frame. So obviously we don't want to do that either. so that we can invest in the properties. And there's an opportunity that's being explored, not decided upon yet in any way, with an organisation called Cornerstone, who have done a successful first one in Tamworth, to sort of convert these right to buys into social property. Is that correct, Angela? Yes. Are there any other questions on this agenda item? No. Okay. So agenda item 7 then, do I have a proposer? Councillor.
Are we taking these as a whole? We'll take them individually?
Yeah, we'll take them on block, yeah. We won't vote on them individually because they're a package as a. We've got a question on one of them.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's not so much that. It's that when it's on block, I totally take on board the points that are made by the Labour Group in relation to the increasing of rent of that. I'm of mind to be agreeable on that kind of thing, but without any kind of alternative, is that to vote against it, is that we'd just be leaving ourselves dead in the water. And therefore, yeah, it's very difficult, because some of these are quite clearly there, but some are slightly more contentious. While I do take on board the point of an individual, is that taking it on block does not necessarily allow direct representation of all of our constituents so easily.
No, thank you for that. No, I get that.
I hear that, and I hear the message before. What I haven't heard is what the alternative is.
Yes, well, that's what I said.
That if you're not happy with, through you, if you're not happy with that, what would you be happy with? Less.
Thank you.
That's a great way to run the authority, isn't it?
Okay, well, on that note, I think I had a proposer there in Councillor Clues. Do I have a second? Councillor Davies, thank you. All in favour? Against? Abstentions? Thank you. That is good. Okay, moving on to agenda item. If I can get my paperwork sorted out, 8. Thank you for your patience. The land at Trinity Road, use of urgent business powers. Recommendation to the board that action taken under the Chief Executive's urgent business powers to dispose of land at Trinity Road be approved. So you'll see on this paper that there is a diagram and some pictures of land that is relevant and pertinent to this recommendation. Do you have any questions on this one? I've got Councillor Watson and Councillor Simpson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The first question, and I don't know if you know the answer, when you look at that diagram, you have that green strip of land between the houses and the railway track. Who owns the rest of that land? My first point. And then my second point was, if we own the rest of that land, would it not be more prudent to turn the piece of land being bought the other way round so that it doesn't become a ransom strip to that piece of land?
So if you want to have a quick look at that diagram to sort of get in our minds what you're saying. So it's, as you look at Trinity Road, it's sort of horizontal as marked out in the diagram. You're suggesting it is almost vertical to that road.
Yeah, because if we own that, if we own that piece of land that runs along the railway track, as you can see to the right hand side, the piece of land between the railway track and the houses, by selling that strip off the way it is, it means that land's inaccessible from the road. It just seems odd to me that you would put yourself in that position rather than, if they want it for amenities and health and safety for their employees, could they turn it the other way around if it's just a piece of land?
I don't know, is my honest answer to that question. We'll let Alison and Angela have a think about that for a second. We'll come to Councillor Simpson and perhaps come back to some answers on that if we've got similar questions.
Thank you, Chairman. My first question, I have two, I should say. My first question is, as a principle, is this report being brought to us in arrears? Because it says to approve the chief executive, the use of the chief executive's urgent business plan. So has this land been sold? Or is this a proposal? And if it's a proposal, I don't see where the urgent business plan is coming to it. It's either done or it isn't done. And it's either urgent business or ordinary business. So has this already happened and we are approving it, or is it to come to us? And secondly, if it's something to happen in the future, my significant concern is that selling this to the railway could have significant unintended consequences. In that, as the railway is a statutory undertaker, they can do whatever they feel like on the land that they own and operate. And what I would like to be assured, either through the sale or through some other form of agreement, that the users here are not going to generate noise and nuisance to the occupiers of Elm Tree Close and Trinity Road. I've no reason to believe that they should, but I am genuinely aware that as a statutory undertaker, the railway has no requirement to apply for planning consent and is not subject to the normal rules of business engagement. So whilst, on the face of it, having a strip that allows their railway employees access for health and safety reasons sounds reasonable, but if they start using the land there for other purposes, once we sold it, we sold it. So I would like, if this has not been sold, to inject some protection for local residents.
Yes, so in terms of the addition of conditions, if you like, on the sale and future use. Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm grateful for the scrutinising eye of colleagues to my right. The concern that I have around this is I've no objection to, in principle, to any of it, except the value of the land at £2,000. I'm conscious that there's a report that's been carried out and the legal costs for any kind of land transfer are quite excessive. Is the fact that we might end up actually losing money by undertaking this unless the actual sale of the land is in excess of that figure. I would expect that if we're doing a favour to the railway, that they should be taking on board all of our costs or considerations.
Yeah, they are. The £2,000 is for the value of the land, all legal costs and any costs associated with it on top of that.
And will be met by the railway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so in terms then of being the orientation, and just bringing it back to Councillor Watson's point, now that we've had some moments to study the drawing, is that feasible, or is that an alternative option?
I don't know the land in detail, but I know that all relevant officers were consulted across the council, and there was a consensus that there wasn't any other use for the land. So that was the sort of professional opinions across the council.
And again, is it in arrears? So has this already happened, and we're being asked to approve it because it's been done under urgent powers because something needed to happen?
I thought so. I thought it had, yeah.
Because it wasn't necessarily clear, because it's asking us, are we minded to sell it at this price? But it's also suggesting there's been approving the urgent powers that have been used. So I think there needs to be some clarity for us. Are we all feeling the same on that?
I think it has already happened, and it's under urgent powers, and it's coming to you. A decision's been already made. I think that's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you. So I think I have Councillor Barnett next, and then Councillor Hobley.
Well, I was just going to say that in response to Councillor Watson, I was just looking on Google Maps, and it looks like there is access from the other end of that strip of land.
Onto a playing field.
Yeah.
Councillor Hobley, then Councillor Close.
I don't know if I'm just asking a really silly question, Chair. If this has already been done, why are we being made to believe that this is a decision that we're going to make? I lost the point. It was a,
I think, is it that the decision to sell has been made because it had to happen urgently, but is it the question around the pricing?
what would be urgent about selling a bit of a news? Is it, I missed it. I don't know what.
I think the urgency was because the request came in and they wanted a piece of land quite urgently because of the value of the land under delegations. I think the chief executive can authorise it, but he has to send a report back to basically say what he's done and give the valuation evidence, etc.
Right, okay. And under that though, the reason for the urgency, could that not be sort of included as part of the report? Because the reason for the urgency I've taken from the bit of the report at the beginning is the health and safety requirements. So say, for example, and we'd be speculating wildly, that Network Rail had to do some work and they required to keep their employees safe. I'm sure we could have granted them right of access to do that instead of selling them it. So the actual grounds for urgency on sale seem a little bit odd. Councillor Simpson. Sorry, it's Councillor Close. Sorry, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions that I would ask if it was a piece of land that was coming up for planning, but I don't see the point now. And really, how can it be that urgent for a piece of scrub land unless the railway know that there's some gold coins under there that we don't know about? Because I know they've just done a piece down Meadow Street and that took months and months for them to get it sorted. And I live by the railway, so I can understand the point, but the urgency point. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Simpson.
Chairman, I know I was cynic, but it was urgent, but we had enough time to go and get a valuation report done in November. And it just all seems a bit confusing to me. I've no issue with selling the land because clearly we have no use for it. But then there's the whole of the rest of that land that we have no use for. And I'd like to see a further report saying, well, what can we do with the rest of that piece of land now? Because we will have a responsibility to maintain it. And so therefore we've got land that's just going to cost us money for. And I'm sure some of those residents in Elm Tree Close might have a use to it that they could take it off our hands and take the responsibility for maintenance away. So I would prefer us to look at a holistic solution for that land. My instinct is, to be honest with you, it being so close to the railway, it really doesn't have much of a future use. We're never going to be able to develop anything on there because it's too close for people to live there on that part on its own. I am slightly concerned, though, that if there are no conditions on what the railway can use that for. I used to live in Whittaker Heath, and the railway, as a statutory undertaker, took a access land like that and developed it into a scrap metal tip. And all the residents were kept awake all night when the railway decided to unload the metal from their trains onto the track, and the generators are going all night. And there was nothing anybody could do as a statutory undertaker. So if we have sold this, I generally would like the assurance that we're going to try and talk to them and, just put in some reasonable protections for people who live there.
So that sounded a little, sorry, I'll come back to you. That sounded a little bit like a proposal with some conditions. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, Chair. So thanks for letting me speak. I don't know this bit of land personally, but I've seen it. If you go around to Elm Tree, the land is banked up. The land, as you travel down the track, down sort of the back of Elm Tree Close, is banked, and it's a pathway down there. I don't think anybody would be wanting to build on there. Whether, as Councillor Simpson said, anyone would want to buy it and extend their gardens, I'm not sure. As for the railway wanting access, I'm too sort of perplexed about it, not quite sure, because they, across the track, there's the other side of the track on Trinity Road, just on the side of the bridge, is some old allotments that are owned by the railway, and they use that area, and that's their access into the sidings there. So I'm not quite sure what they actually need this bit of land for. And the bit that you think is a park across the road, if you're looking at it on Google, is in Pear Tree, is a bit of just land that's left over and is actually earmarked for Kingsby Station, if ever it was to be built. That's just a bit of context, Chair.
Thank you, no, that's useful, thank you very much. Councillor Hobley.
Just with regard to this whole thing, if it's already been done, we're not wasting time talking about it. Because I appreciate Councillor Simpson's always appreciate Councillor Simpson's depth into these things, but it's pointless discussion if it's already been done.
Does that sound like a proposal for approval? Move it on? Well, if that's the case, then I can move that from the chair. Do I have a second? Councillor Watson, all in favour? Against? Abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 9. This is a private sector shared service. So currently we have a shared service with Nuneaton. The SLA is up for renewal, and this proposal is to take that back into North Warwickshire as opposed to using the Nuneaton shared service, and that the growth bid in the following financial year of 25,000 be agreed to cover the additional costs of bringing this service in-house, which we currently pay £75,000 for. Any questions on this item? Councillor Parsons, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favour of the proposal. I think it would be a good thing to bring these services back in-house, and I think we can probably make better use of it by doing that. My question is the growth of just £25,000, is that really achievable to bring this in and get it running properly with just £25,000 on top of what we're already paying?
Thank you. I'll collect a couple of questions, then come to Angela. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, my question, similar to Councillor Parsons, is talking about a 25k increase. To my mind, we already have a service, and I know that there's talk about it not being where it needs to be. Or shouldn't we be managing that service better so we're getting the service we could? Because it seems to me we're taking it in-house on the assumption we can do it better. Because I know it's further down in the report, it also talks about TUPE potentially being applied. If that's the case, we're going to get the same people doing the job. So it's just some assurances around what the confidence we have of bringing it back in-house, and that we can deliver it better for ultimately for the people receiving the service.
Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Part of the trigger to this is the review of the maintenance service and the opportunity to align the private sector shared service tasks with that revised maintenance service, because although there is a clear professional aspect to managing tenancies in the private sector, it is largely around a condition of a property or a house in multiple occupation, and understanding where those hazards are, which is what the maintenance service are doing day in, day out in your own stock. And then obviously there is the professional aspect of that brings in the enforcement. We have had an uneven service with Nuneaton and Bedworth because of their difficulties in recruiting, which could read across to us. But I think in essence, by aligning it with the new maintenance service, we're a bit out of sync here because it might not be agreed further in the agenda. Then we think that we could provide a robust service locally rather than being removed in Nuneaton. And as the report says, there would be better alignment with environmental health in North Warwickshire and also planning colleagues.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. What I'd be interested in going forward, if this proposal is taken, is what potential is there for expansion of the service, and thus effectively of selling it elsewhere. We've mentioned elsewhere around our inability to raise income via other sources, whereas this strikes me as if we can become an exemplar in the way that we operate, to potentially sell to others. I would like that to be considered going forward, that we look for a slightly more entrepreneurial approach when taking on and developing new services.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good idea. I think if we could get something established and performing in the way that you would want it to perform, then it then becomes scalable and saleable. I think that's a future growth element, but obviously Nuneaton have been doing that in a shared basis and we've been paying a proportion. There's nothing to say that we can't offer a good service and do that in a similar way. I like the ambition. Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Sharon. I'm focusing really on paragraph 6.3.3. And I'd be interested to understand how much this service cost us to provide prior to its transfer in 2019. And just some assurance, if you will, that £100,000 is the total budget, or is it the budget plus central support charges and everything else? What is the entire package? 100,000 or more than 100,000?
Is that an Alison one or is that an Angela one between the two of you?
Yes. But I haven't got the figures for how much it cost. Prior to 2002.
The 100,000 is the salary cost, so that's not all the central support costs, etc.
So just to give us a view, I mean, I know these things they go up down, but broadly, what would you expect central support and everything else to take that job?
Not sure, to be honest. I mean, we're not employing any extra accountants or any extra support service staff to fulfil this service. It's just sort of
sits within the structure as is that already takes its share of central support costs. So do you anticipate that those central support costs will be spread further because this is added in, or it would fall under Angela's structure and it retains the amount it takes now?
Yeah, I mean there will, if you've got I don't know how many staff it is, but if you've got two more staff to pay, then obviously that we wouldn't employ someone else to pay two more staff. So most of this change wouldn't impact on the cost of support services, but we would divvy it up so this would get.
So it just be spread wider.
Yeah,
over a broader
any
base.
additional costs for the council.
Oh, I'm grateful for that, Sharon, but it really does help us to have an input cost. And again, I'm sort of guessing on what I've heard. Is that the in full employment cost, or is that salary?
What was on cost? Sorry,
Yes, was on
cost.
So the whole additional
Yes.
cost, pension and everything else is
All up, as opposed to just purely salary.
And I understand, Sharon, it is difficult to attract senior or indeed any environmental health officers. Do we have a reasonable degree of confidence that we're going to be able to go out there and attract a senior EHO?
It is difficult to recruit across local government, but yes, we would like to take this forward and go confidently in recruitment. But yeah, it is difficult to recruit.
And in the interim, whilst if this was to be approved, in the interim, obviously there's an element of compliance, obviously, that we need to achieve as a local authority. Have you got a sort of an interim management plan of how you would deliver that in whilst that recruitment was, if that recruitment was challenging?
If we take the essence of the service is to ensure the condition of properties in the private sector is where it needs to be, then that does align with what we do in housing maintenance. So we would have capacity. As you see from the report, there's not many. it's not 100 a week. It's a few a week. We would have capacity to do that, and working with environmental health colleagues, they would offer the professional aspect to that around enforcement till we build up the team. I do think there is a cross-pollination as well into the maintenance team, because the maintenance team largely at the moment look at decent home standards. Part of the decent home standard is around hazards, but they tend to have a technical aspect in that. And therefore I saw this sort of fitting nicely as two services learning from each other, one about condition and the other about hazards, which is a very high profile issue around damp and mould and disrepair. So I did think there was a neat relationship that matches the national picture around property conditions, whatever tenure.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Humphreys.
I'm just wondering, looking at that, that's one element, that is a shared service. Is there a trend? Because we're looking at building controls, that's coming out. We've also got resident vents, which is shared at the moment, I believe, and also we have democratic services. Is there a tendency now, or are we looking at bringing it all back in-house so that we've got full control over it? Or it's just as a one-off opportunity where this is concerned?
I think each and every one of those things has done on its own merits. If whilst the SLA is strong and it's working, there's no reason to bring it back in-house fully, 100%. For example, democratic services seems to be working quite well for the management of elections, with Nuneaton and Bedworth being offset with North Warwickshire. I think it has to be done and reviewed in terms of how the SLA is being delivered. I don't think there's a reason to just say on block, we're just going to do this, or we're just going to leave it out or bring it back in-house. I don't think we'd do that without considering each one independently.
Just to say, because
it's not a policy decision.
No, Nuneaton and Bedworth reviewed financial inclusion, didn't they? I think our last meeting that came. So you know, as things change within an authority, sometimes you do review it, or if you're perhaps not happy with the service you're getting or whatever. So I think you're absolutely right. You have to review them individually, which we do.
Yeah. And some are working very well, some less well. So you judge it on the service that you're getting, really, don't you? I think it's not an overall policy decision. No. Any other questions on that one, or shall I move that to a vote? Do I have a proposer of any for that one?
Who's that, Jim?
Thank you, Councillor Clues. Do I have a second? Councillor Simpson, thank you. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 10, the general fund revenue budget, services recharged across all boards. So, do we have any questions on this one? Councillor Stewart.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a general comment, really, in relation to the figures that are listed against staff welfare. Is that it's been mentioned already this evening about the difficulties in recruiting staff. And it strikes me that the best way of going about overcoming that problem is to retain the staff that we've already got. Similarly, is that when it comes to matters of productivity, is if we're looking at an overall staffing budget of £14 million, a 1% reduction, every 1% reduction in terms of absence, the equivalent to £140,000 worth of productivity. It strikes me, therefore, as well, is that to invest more in our staff welfare budget could actually have a significant value over and above its price. The other thing that comes from that as well is that there's a sell-on here, is that when it actually comes to recruitment, the message that we spend have just increased our spending on staff welfare by an incredibly large percentage with a remarkably small amount of money that actually incurs. Exactly right. And the message that sends out both to our staff in terms of the value that we place upon them, and also for any attracting new staff or attracting people into local government. I think if it's not possible this year, certainly should be considered in future years when drawing up such policies.
Yes, I'm well aware, as Councillor Clues is chair of the special sub, they talk about retention and recruitment and attracting talent to the borough on a regular basis, and the suite of initiatives that can do that is as part of that, isn't it? Absolutely.
And as I'd just like to take the opportunity to dissuade Councillor Parsons of something that he said earlier in terms of consultants' rates going up. As a consultant who works in recruitment and retention within local government, I have spent my time not raising my rates further because I have a belief in the actual sector. But any advice and guidance that I can assist with the special subgroup in their work, then I'll be more than happy to do that. Pro bono.
It wasn't personal.
Thank you very much for the offer. Councillor Clues then.
Thank you, Chair. I like what Councillor Stewart just said, and yeah, we've got to remember that our staff and our officers do a damn good job. You know, I've worked with the special sub and I've worked with housing and all those. And one of my biggest states is whenever we have special sub, and Councillor Parsons was on it for quite a long time. I do miss him being back on it, but Councillor Chapman's on it now, and we've got a nice little subgroup that we work with. As I've always said, if we don't look after our staff, what we're going to do and our officers when they go. And I'm always worried that we put too much work on some of our officers because of the recruitment that we need to do. But as I spoke to you earlier, I spoke to one or two, we need to look at the package. But our officers are always there. They step up, you know, and that is one of the thankful things. And I will always say to it, that any of our staff, if it's just been meant to whatever staff it is, if it's even Mr. Maxey, you know, and I became a councillor to help my community, not just my residents, but our community. But we couldn't do it. None of us sitting here to do it without all our staff.
Quite agree. Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you. I agree with all that. I do. I think it is an important area. I'm just a little bit confused as to how much we actually spend, because I think Appendix B says nothing, and Appendix A, which is, I accept, sorry, a different part of Appendix B says just over £1,000. So, and it's what, it's just an accounting like a band that it's seen where we're not seeing it. Or is it genuinely zero or £1,000?
No, it's 22,036 on this one here. On Appendix B, page 67 of 93. I've got here staff welfare 3292 on the left hand side, code 3292. About 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 lines down. I'll show it to you after. I think they'll you know, they'll be. Yeah, there's because obviously there's different parts by different areas. Yeah. There's different allocation to different parts of the budget. So, for example, if you've got a very big department, they'll have more allocation than a smaller one. And
that was really what I was hoping you'd say, that you know, it wasn't just what I looked at. So happy with that. But I do think it's well worth looking at.
I think it's well worth a review, and obviously there's budget conversations coming up over the next few weeks.
And can I just check, Sharon, the position as far as the medium-term financial strategy is concerned? I think there's a typo in section 2.2, where it says the savings target was not included for 27-28. And I think that should say 23-24 rather than 27-28, because we're looking at £1 million saving in 27-28. I just wanted to be clear that we were not looking at this point for additional savings aside from to cover any growth items.
Just answer that, Chair. No, we're not looking for any savings until 25-26, from 500,000 25-26, and 500,000 26-27, and £1 million in 27-28. Yes, that's what the medium-term financial strategy said.
Yeah, and that's what I thought. It's that line which says additional savings target was not included with 27-28.
We'll just tweak that.
Okay.
Councillor Stewart.
Sorry, just to come in on that. Having worked at local authorities where the progression of savings, which is perceived by the staff as the progression of cuts, is that I would like to see alternatives, savings to be delivered quickly rather than moving to the service as it's going to look 4 years hence, rather than this degradation of services or offerings, and with the morale sapping impacts that it has on staff, as well at the same time when there is this sword of Damocles potentially hovering over you, that there's going to be what is the equivalent of 7% cuts, which if you're sat in a team of tend to thinking, well, it's going to be one of us going forward. Is that it's always amazed me that there is this. We'll do this much this year and this much next year, where it's just going to be, that's what the service is going to look like in 2 years' time, and that's going to be the service we're going to offer. Let's just do it now.
I get your point on that. I do understand that. So I think if you've got something bad that you've got to do, sometimes it's better to just get it done and out of the way. I think the issue is that these forecasts are based on what we do today. They're based on forecasting forward the next 4 years of what we do now. And if we do nothing different, these are the savings we will have to make. The point is that we're doing something different. And that's what that is saying to you. So if we don't do something different, we will have to make £500,000 worth of savings. So it's about putting the things in place and to change that outcome.
But again, doing things differently is that if the money's not there, the savings are going to have to be found. And it's moving to that, doing things differently to deliver that going forward with that increasing efficiency, which from a staffing point of view is still that sword flying over your head.
I understand that, but I think growth and income, growing your income, because it gets to a point where that's the target, that is the goal. It's actually using the money that you have to do better, more effective and efficient things with it, rather than just looking forward to saying, well, that service we're not going to be able to offer, we might have to offer it differently, but actually that's what we want to set out, what we want to do, and that's what the next round of budget conversations will be about. Do you want to come in on that, Alison?
Yeah, just to say, when we presented the medium-term financial strategy, there's quite a lot of initiatives that we're working on in terms of efficiency savings, but also sort of income generation. So there's a whole package of savings, but the way we've structured the medium-term financial strategy and the savings being delivered gives us time to properly implement those transformation programs and not just make cuts. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
So I'm saying it wouldn't, it's obviously going to lead to reductions, but it's sort of a managed approach to it, rather than just making, your salami slicing that does happen often if you've got to make savings really quickly to balance your budget.
Absolutely. Did I see Mr. Humphreys hand up?
But isn't the MTFS, you have to do projections to 27, 28 anyway as part of legality, but you can only do projections based on what you know today. So you can't just sort of draw a line underneath it. You have to actually make some assumptions. It might be your best guess or your worst guess.
Yeah, the recommendation is that you do a 3 to 5 year medium-term financial strategy, but obviously, after the first 1 or 2 years, you are just guessing, because we don't even know what so our financial assessment from the government is only sort of 1 year at a time at the moment. So you do have to make assumptions based on the best information. Things like inflation, pay awards, you can only do that based on the best information you've got at the time, and you update that regular intervals. When the information, you got more information available.
Thank you. Okay, so with that in mind then, and there doesn't seem to be any more hands up, do I have a proposer for that agenda item 10? Councillor Davey, a second. Councillor Humphreys, all in favour? That's carried, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 11.
Could we have abstentions, Chair?
Oh yes, abstentions. Sorry, apologise. I took that as read because you'd said at the beginning.
Yes.
Abstentions.
Yes, thank you.
So that they're
Paid as read, that's right.
Apologies for that, Councillor Clark. Agenda item 11, the General Fund Revenue Budget Services remaining revised and estimates for 24-25 and fees and charges. So this evening we have a recommendation to approve the revised budget 23-24, to approve the 24-25 estimates as presented in the overall tax set for the Executive Board on the 12th of February, and approve the fees and charges detailed in Appendix 6. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chairman. It's similar to my question on the previous item. With the fees and charges that are in Appendix C, are they covering our costs? I think it's basically the same questions that we have in I really do not understand, I don't pretend to understand the way we charge for collection of cesspool and septic tank emptying.
Okay.
And I don't really want to go into what is the difference of a weak load and a strong load. But what I do is, what are we actually going to charge our customers? Because I can see we have got a variety of charges there, which are plus 100% of the Severn Trent cost.
Yeah.
And so, and whilst I have no issue at all with us passing on the cost, because that's the cost of the service, I do feel as though as we are approving that charge, like nobody is before we vote for it.
Okay, so the principle, and you're right from the beginning to say, does it cover our costs? And I think it's fair to say it hasn't in the past covered the costs, because we get those services, the cesspool services and the bulky waste services from a third-party provider, and we're charging a fixed rate, but they're charging us something that might go up. So fundamentally, what we're saying is we will charge X, but we will all, so for example, bulky waste. So 1 to 3 items, the current charge at the moment is £29. We're talking about charging £34. But if a provider suddenly starts charging £35, we will have to charge that. So we will have to charge what we're being charged at least at 100% before we, because at the moment we have been wearing and it's been being subsidised, and that's not sustainable. So for the Severn Trent and for the bulky waste, that's why you haven't got it will be 50p or it will be £2.50. It will be, if they increase their charges, we will have to increase our charges, because so we need to recover what we are being charged first. And that's the difference.
Joan, I'm generally quite happy with that. I think if the board is being asked to approve the charge, I'd like to know what it's going to be. Even as what is it now? What might it be? And how are we going to advise our customers of the septic tank and cesspool emptying service of what the cost is? Because there are alternative suppliers, and well, I'd like to be sure that we were being competitive with the alternative suppliers, but I wouldn't like us to be approving something which may be a very significant increase if it's not. So I have no method of judging what the cost will be. Is it, if you like, at the minute we're charging 150 or 250, and we're going to go up to 160 or 267 plus 7/10 in addition? That's what I'm not clear.
Okay. Well, just to also put before I bring Alison in, one of the things that we know is that we've been very competitive in the past. We've probably been cheaper than a lot of people. One of the other isn't an anti-competitive things. We also go to areas where some of the other more competitive providers won't go to because they're too rural. So they don't find it to be effective on their route planning. So we have some of those issues as well. So we have additional costs because we pick up all of those not so easy to get to places as well. But Alison, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, there's a combination of things within charges, because we've got the fees and charges strategy that was agreed as part of medium-term strategy. So in theory, we shouldn't be subsidising services, so covering costs, which is the question you asked. We have subsidised services, and there's still some services that we are, because parking, for example, is a net expenditure, and even though there's a recommendation to increase them, that's not breaking even, if you like. With the cesspools, we have no control over what Severn Trent are charger. So in the past, we've had our fee, and if they go up by whatever, then we don't cover costs. So we don't know what the charge is going to be for April. That's just it. So I can't really answer your questions. I don't know what the charge is going to be, but we're trying to. So we don't subsidise it. We're trying to sort of say, that element of it, we would just pass that cost over. We're trying not to subsidise the charges, but we don't know yet what they're going to be.
Okay, Joan, I think what I'm trying to get at is the current, if I've understood it properly, the current charge of 150 or 250 is the charge. Yeah. It's going up to 160 or 267 plus something else.
That's based on their current charges. So that's based on Severn Trent's current charges as they are currently. What that doesn't account for is a charge that an increase that they may apply in April.
Okay. I'm starting to understand. So it's the level of increase that Severn Trent charge, not the full Severn Trent charge.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
To an extent, that's included already.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we pay that now, and the customer pays that now. So we're anticipating they pay 250 now, they'll pay 267 in April. However, if the Severn Trent charges go up by 10%, we won't be able to maintain that £267. So we'll have to put the additional element onto that, otherwise we won't cover the cost. So this is the principle
No, I understand
that we're agreeing to, really, rather than the hard pounds, if you like.
Yeah.
Is that more clear?
No, and generally, as I said, I am in favour of us at least covering our costs on these things. So it's not that. It was just how we explain that message to our customers. But I'm happy.
Yeah, I think the communication to that about that is, and if the prices change more frequently than they have done, because our fees and charges have been set, we perhaps need to put some additional comms around that with, through the call centre and people like that, so that people are aware of, well, before they book it, what they're going to be paying.
Yeah.
Councillor Parsons and Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I bow to Councillor Simpson's knowledge on the cesspools and stuff. That's because he's got absolutely.
We won't answer that, Councillor
There we
Parsons.
go. But I do share his concern that actually not being able to tell our customers what the charges are is difficult. It's the bulky waste area that concerns me. Our bulky waste service is excellent, and there is a downside, however, to not maintaining that service as it is to an extent, because obviously what we pick up at the end is the bill for fly tipping, and if the bulky service becomes challenging in terms of its cost, we pay at the other end, and I think we've got to bear that in mind, and that's another reason why I think we'll be abstaining on this at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Steve Stewart next.
We've talked about the impact of the message we do on recruitment and retention. I am slightly concerned about what the impact would be if we recommend a deep dive into cesspools. A question that I think is completely unfair and unanswerable, but again, I think shows the lack of granularity in what we've been presenting with, is that I'd like to know what increase we would see in terms of cash from the increase of the car park rates for the Birmingham Road car park in Water Autumn, which, since we've introduced car parking charges, is completely unused, but has led to the use of side streets and illegal parking causing significant problems around the village, as I'm sure Councillor Watson can testify for, and therefore unable to actually sort of like say what benefit will bring in cash terms, which I think will basically be very small, and relating to that to the impact, and again this is price and value kind of aspect. So again, it's difficult without any kind of granularity or consultation with local council ahead of these things being introduced.
Okay, so obviously when the consultation was done for parking charges, it moved from being 1 hour free to 2 hours free, which means that it doesn't make the council any money. It's a cost reduction exercise essentially. This proposed increase is in line with the pay we pay people to and the cost of that management of those sites, and of course it's borough wide and it impacts different areas in different ways. We were well aware of that. I think a statistic I think that's probably well worth understanding is over 90% of people that use our borough car parks do so and utilise the free of charge 2 hours. So actually for the majority of people this increase will not impact anything because over 90% of our users park for free anyway.
we're arguing the same point. It's the impact of actually having any charge at all that's leading people not to use the car park in the first place, be that free or any other kind of period at all. Also, is that while I take on board the cost of the management of the car park, we haven't seen anyone you can park there seemingly free of jeopardy, both on street or off street, all the time. Again, I'd like to see the figures in terms of how many tickets have actually been handed out for the use of our car parks, as well as the income that's been generated. If it's not for income generation, then there's no need to raise the cost as far as I can see, or actually have them at all.
But it's cost avoidance, not necessarily income generation. So that's a cost to the council and a subsidy from all the preset payers. So, but in response to your point, I would suggest that goes via the task and finish group, because there's a car park task and finish group that works across the council, which is widely represented, and I think that's a point for them in relation to that. But obviously, this is a broader aspect of fees and charges across the borough. I think I had Councillor Hobley, then Councillor Bartlett, and then Councillor Phillips seemed to be indicating. Is that right? Or were you just scratching? Okay, so Councillor Hobley first. Yes, we need to lift the tone, don't we?
On the back of Councillor Stewart's concern with the car park, we might be voting on some extraordinary powers to shift that scene. But just on the back of Councillor Parsons' great point about the bulk waste, I've seen in my ward in the last 3 days with a couple of really serious fly tipping issues, where our parish council are not currently funding the CCTV of a high area, a regular fly tipping point, just on Clock Bridge in Hartsell, and it is full of old sofas. The only thing I worry about when we see this bulk waste increasing is the people who are offering cheap waste removal are also lowering their prices, and they are your fly tippers who are not getting caught, not getting prosecuted. The cost for the CCTV to police this issue, as well as actually finding the person who has fly tipped and not prosecuting an innocent, if not so diligent member of the public, the costs are so much more than what is really stated in the report. So it's important to keep that charge low so that people do utilise it as much as possible to stop these further massive charges that are coming either by parish or by ourselves on waste removal.
No, I understand that. I mean, I think that I think that it's good value. I've recently used the service myself to get rid of a sofa and I had a new one, and I couldn't get at that price from anywhere else. In terms of the company delivering the new sofa to take the old one away, it was 3 times that. So I think actually it is really good value, and I hate fly tipping. It's a particular bugbear of mine. I absolutely detest it. I think it's abhorrent. But I think that people who are minded to get rid of their waste effectively, and those that aren't, they're sadly very different people, and we need to deal with those. And I think that's an enforcement issue that needs support and an extra work on. But I think it's a separate issue from moving that, to be honest, by like £4, because I think it's still genuinely very good value compared to what you can get outside from other areas, having just done it. So, but I do take your point. Nobody wants more fly tipping. It's a safeguard again for all of us. All of our areas are blighted at the moment, and it is particularly unpleasant.
I just wanted to point out what I'm assuming is a couple of typos. This is on parking charges, Appendix C, page 84. We've got some charges there for BLUS badge holders, which I assume will be blue badge holders. But on that in particular as well, the up to 4 hours charge, which for regular parkers is going from 250 to 270. For blue badge holders seems to be going from 250 to 279. Assuming that should also be 270, or I don't see why we'd be charging blue badge holders.
No, it shouldn't be more. That's a typo. You're quite right. That is a typo.
Plus badge holders.
For plus badge holders, there's none of those, so it doesn't apply to anyone.
I've got fingers like this Keith, and that happens with me on time. 9 0, yeah.
Yeah, so aside from the typos, then,
That's it.
that was
Yeah.
your comment, thank you. Are there any more questions on that one before we go to the vote? No, we'll move that forward then. Do I have a proposer for agenda item 11? Councillor Humphreys, thank you very much. And a second? Councillor Watson, thank you very much. All in favour? Thank you. Against? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 12, irrecoverable debts. So the debts in, this is for us to prove that the debts in Appendix A and B of the report be approved for write-off. So recommendation A, non-domestic rate debt totaling 262,218 and irrecoverable council tax debts of 9,197. Any questions upon the amount? Councillor Simpson.
Chairman, in the past, when we agreed to write off with irrecoverable debts, that was only, if you like, I think, a sort of accounting agreement. If we subsequently in the future found that we could recover them, that we did, and I'm presuming that that is still the case. Also previously, when this was a Part 2 report, we were given the comparative amounts for previous years as to was the level of debt increasing that was written off or decreasing. I can't remember what it was for previous years, but I'd appreciate some context into where this is. Particularly the overall position, if you like, from before the new computer system was introduced a few years ago, and then how that changed following the introduction of the computer system and COVID and now.
Take that one, Alison.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can do a report, the bigger picture in terms of recovery. Obviously, COVID's had a very big impact on recovery.
Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, £250,000 is just a staggering number to kind of write off. Is my first comment, really. But looking at Appendix A, I'm just quite surprised. And whilst I accept that some of these businesses have run insolvent, some of these date back to 2017. It just seems a long time to be chasing a debt to now becoming, 6 years later to say, oh, we're not going to get it.
Can I just clarify one point? So, for example, this is writing off the entire debt that individual owes. That entire debt is not due to us. It isn't due as in to us directly, that all of it comes to us. We collect it on behalf of other people as well as ourselves. That is not simply our level of write-off from our accounts.
No, it's the total. So for council tax, for example, we keep about 10% of it. So that's the total because we collect on that. Business rates the percentages are a little bit more difficult to say because we're in a business rates pool. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's not, you don't get to keep all of it if we do collect it.
So when we're agreeing to write off this essentially £270,000 worth of debt, around 10% of that for that council tax one is money that we would get, not it's not all a loss to this council, albeit it's a loss generally, and obviously that has an impact.
Can I just come back on that, if I may? I accept that and I understand that. In a way, it's kind of worse because we're writing it off on behalf of somebody else who's expecting to get the money. It's just some of those years where it says the liability years. It just seems that we should have known before now to say we're never going to get this money. Now, to actually provide for that debt for that long, or to accept that for that long, just seems a long time for me. And I just wonder what the process was that we had internally for going, right, we're never going to get it, let's write it down.
But before, as you say, before it gets too much, I think one of the issues, one of the ways we've always wanted to work in the past is to recover as much as possible. And it's at the point at which these people have become insolvent or have gone into IVAs that we've actually taken these decisions because there isn't a recovery potentially then available. So it's like not ever getting to the point where we're accepting that we won't get it back. But in doing so, it then becomes protracted. And I think there's perhaps a better balance in there than we have currently. And I know that Alison is working on recovery and put a lot more focus on recovery, but that actually has a bit of a lag and takes time to then catch up. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I think that there's various reasons. 2017 does seem very old. I agree, but there are various reasons why sometimes consultancies take longer to make the decision that we're going to write it off. But I think it's fair to say, since COVID, we've been quite slow in picking up with recovery. So we're working on, I think in November, we started our first courts again. So we are ramped it back up now, but we won't see the impact of that until a few months down the line.
Okay.
Councillor Simpson next.
Thank you, Tom. I hear what you say about the percentage, but I thought it was slightly different. We 10% of it is ours if we collect it and if we write it off. But if we're in an over recovery period, so if you like, we collect more than the amount due for the other precepting authorities, I thought we retained a greater amount. So whilst in general it may appear to be 10% of that is ours, surely that's different per year based upon what the collection rate is?
No, our percentage of the council tax is about 10% in round figures. So it all goes into the collection fund, and then we have a deficit or surplus on the collection fund, and we get our proportion of the surplus or deficit, which is always 10%.
Well, I'd misremembered, Chairman. I thought there was an incentive to us to over collect, and we got a greater proportion.
Sadly not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, with as unpalatable as that is, do I have a proposal? I'll move that from the chair then.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart, for seconding that. All in favour? Thank you, that's carried.
Move agenda item 13.
Thank you. So that's moving into P&C. So we'll give Marina a few minutes